more sense to speak here? Because you've been involved in helping coordinate the project. But I think we put you there.
Okay.
It's KU Leuven is how to refer to it, isn't it? I think that makes most sense. And then we have the roundtable discussion. Thank you. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to this joint meeting between the former Members Association of the European Parliament and the European Parliamentary Research Service, EPRS, which I have the privilege to lead for the moment. And it's a great pleasure to see so many of you here and to come together finally physically in the enceinte of the Library of the European Parliament. This is the first proper meeting that we have. We've had a couple of other smaller ones, but this is the first proper official meeting that we've had in the European Parliament in this room in the last 2 years. So it's wonderful that so many people are actually here this afternoon, and it's my great pleasure and joy to welcome you to what we consider to be the spiritual home here of the Parliamentary Research Service. Thank you so much for joining us, and it's a great privilege and it's a pleasure to work together with the former Members Association. And the purpose of the seminar this afternoon is to look at and consider the issues which are raised by a publication, Present Future of Europe, by Monica Boldy, who's going to speak in a few minutes, Vice President of the former Members Association, which seeks to identify the challenges, the choices, the options that face Europe as we go forward. And of course, we have just been living through not only the dangers of the COVID period, but of course now the terrible war, Russia's terrible war on Ukraine, with all the implications not only for the Ukrainian people and for peace and stability on our continent, but for the role of Europe going forwards geopolitically. This is both a serious challenge, but it's also an opportunity for Europe. And some of those dimensions and dynamics are things which we'll be talking about this afternoon. But before we get down to the detailed discussion on that publication and hear from some of the authors and sponsors of it, I'm going to pass the microphone to the President of the former Members Association and, of course, former President of the European Parliament, Hans-Gert Pöttering, to talk a little bit about the FMA proposal which has been put on the table and to set the scene for this afternoon's discussion. And I should say that some years ago I worked with Hans-Gert, not only when he was leader of the EPP group, but when he was President of the European Parliament, and it was a great pleasure those 2.5 years when we had the chance to contribute something to the European scene so positively, and it was a great period in my own personal career for which I will for always remain grateful to Hans-Gert.
Thank you. You took the floor. Thank you so much for the applause for Anthony Teasdale. Honourable members of the European Parliament, Anthony Teasdale will introduce all of you, so it's not part of my time, but Anthony will do it. Dear honourable former members of the European Parliament, dear Anthony Teasdale, dear colleagues, dear ladies and gentlemen. I would like to thank the Director General of the European Parliament Research Service, Anthony Teasdale, for his words and for co-organising this roundtable discussion today with our association. Today I'm still chairman of our former Members Association. Tomorrow we will have a new president. It's always for 4 years. It's an unwritten law. And Klaus Hensch will be but he still has to be voted. There is a procedure, of course, but he will be the new president of the former Members Association. My sincere thanks go to the members of Parliament who have accepted our invitation. The board of our former Members Association has decided to prepare a contribution for the Conference on the Future of Europe, based on the considerations of our reflection group on the future of the European Union, composed of eminent former MEPs and the academic support of Professor Stephen van Hecke, who is with us today. I would like to thank our Vice President, Monica Baldi, very to the left, and our Secretary of our organization, Teresa Riera Madurell, for their presence today as co-editors of our FMA publication, which collects our ideas and those of our experts and partners who have been cooperating with us over the past month. I also would like to express my thanks to Dr. Dieter Schlenker, Director of the EU Historical Archives, for their great support for the production of this publication and for the continuous excellent cooperation. And you will find at the beginning of the book the reflection group paper, which are our proposals, so I will not read everything, but you can read it in the book. Our work has not finished with the end of the conference. It has just started in order to make sure there is a concrete follow-up to make the European Union is more efficient, increases its capacity to act, and delivers what citizens expect. We acknowledge how important security and defense are. We approved our contribution to the Conference on the Future of Europe in December, this is important, in December last year, and after having submitted it to the conference, a war broke out in Europe. There is war not in the European Union, but outside the European Union, and a dictator in the Kremlin has attacked the people of Ukraine. This makes it clear what the European Union means. There is peace, and we live on the basis of law and our treaties. This is a great difference, and we always have to distinguish between the European Union on the one hand side and the total of Europe on the other side. When we look at Russia's terrible war against Ukraine, we realize that the relations are not based on a treaty or on respect for legal order. We should value the European Union for its capacity to guarantee peace. The conference has now concluded its work, and when reading the report on the final outcome of the conference, we realize that many proposals we put on the table were felt important not only by us. The key issues seem to remain the same before and after the conference, but it is important to read the variety of proposals and measures in which the proposals and measures are articulated by the plenary of the European Parliament. Our 5 general guidelines were and remain of the reflection group. First, our values and principles, the dignity of the human being, freedom, human rights, democracy, peace, legal order, and of course solidarity between the European people. Second, our capacity to act with the necessary tools and means to defend our values and interests. Third, the need to reconcile economic interests with the social protection on the basis of a competitive social market economy. This is a phrase from the Lisbon Treaty. Competitive social market economy. Fourth, the important questions of environmental and climate protection standards. Fifth, strengthen EU democracy should be strengthened at all levels, from the local level to the regional level to the national level and to the European level. Our 10 proposals are shared in the report in different ways and with a variety of measures. We need European cooperation, or maybe even partial integration as far as health is concerned, also considering a treaty change. The plenary indicated as a priority, and I quote now the European Parliament, and it's very similar, if you look into the book, to our proposal, which were made before the European Parliament took its decision. And so we are a little bit proud that we could give an input to the decision of the European Parliament. I quote the European Parliament: enhance the European Health Union using the full potential of the current framework and include health and healthcare among the shared competencies between the EU and the EU member states by amending Article 4 of the treaty. And now end of the quote, by improving the effectiveness of European governance, for example, in the event of a pandemic or for rare diseases, as Elmar Brok had already proposed during the convention so many years ago. But the governments were not ready to go this step, and we would have been much more effective if this would have been already responsibility of the European Union. In our proposal, we also made it clear that we must develop a genuine EU foreign security and defence policy, taking foreign affairs decisions through qualified majority voting in the Council. We have to do more to strengthen the EU pillar of NATO. I will not quote now what I have here in my paper prepared, what the Parliament said. If I would quote all this, then I think I could speak for half an hour, but I should only speak for 10 minutes. We indicated that we should develop our own resources. This is a new point now, and the EU should retain fiscal autonomy. The European Union should be able to collect money on the financial markets by issuing bonds. These questions should be discussed in the next midterm review of the 2021-2027 multi-annual financial framework. And now I will quote the plenary. The plenary said that, quote, harmonizing and coordinating tax policies within the member states of the EU in order to prevent tax evasion and avoidance, avoiding tax havens within the EU and targeting offshoring within Europe, including by ensuring that decisions on tax matters can be taken by qualified majority in the Council of the EU. On the other hand, there are recommendations from citizens panels that state that taxation is a matter for individual countries which have their own objectives and circumstances. So there is still room for discussion. End of the quote. Our fourth question is digitalization, and in particular the need to fight cybercrime and to do it together in the European Union. This is a new challenge, and the need to tackle it is very clear in the proposals of the plenary as one of the most pressing issues, providing a stronger role of the European Union in countering cyber security threats. Our fifth concrete proposal is very important and concerns the education of young people. I think this is very, very important in respect to the social media. I'm not so familiar with, but you are certainly all very familiar with it. But for the young generation, it's very important that they get a good education, especially as far as European culture is concerned, history is concerned, and so on. So, dear colleagues, the sixth point is the need to defend the rule of law, what is, of course, of greatest importance for the strength of the European Union. If we don't follow the rule of law in the European Union, we will never be strong outside the European Union, and so these 2 points go together, the strengthening of the legal situation of the European Union and our strength outside. The seventh point is that we need a European energy union. I will not quote the plenary. And I remember from our time, and Joe Linen is here, who was very prominent as well in the question of the convention and so on, there's one main difference between others, between the proposal of the Constitution and the Lisbon Treaty, and that is an article concerning energy. And this was something the Polish wanted to have. And I remember in one council, I think I can say it here, when I made my speech in the European Council, I looked to the President of Poland, Lech Kaczynski, and said there is a difference between the Constitutional Treaty and the Lisbon Treaty, and that is energy. And that's why I asked this country, I didn't mention Poland, to ratify the treaty quite soon. And he did not like it that I referred to him without mentioning the name. But we accepted the Polish concerns, and this was in 2007, the Polish concerns concerning the energy question. The eighth point is the so-called Spitzenkandidaten system. European parties have people on the head of the list and we have to be open to transnational lists. And this was a very difficult point. There was great opposition against the transnational list, and finally we said we should open it a little bit, but we should not only have transnational lists, but we should give some possibility to vote for the Spitzenkandidaten for the different parties. And unfortunately, we must say the Spitzenkandidaten process did not work last time because the European Parliament was not able to make a proposal to elect somebody as the European Parliament's candidate. The eighth point is Spitzenkandidat. The ninth point is the Council of Ministers, that it should be more transparent and should be developed into a more tangible, visible entity. So, and I quote again the plenary, I think this is important, the EU needs to improve the transparency of its decision-making process and institutions. For instance, the meetings of the Council and the European Parliament, including its votes, should be broadcasted online in the same way. This would allow interested citizens to follow EU policy making and hold politicians and policymakers accountable. The European Parliament's right of inquiry should be strengthened. End of the quote. The 10th question from our side is the situation in the Western Balkans. The war in Ukraine shows us how countries such as Russia, China and Turkey try to influence the Western Balkan countries. They have to do their homework. We have to do our homework. And gradually, those Western Balkan countries should join the European Union. This specific region is not specifically mentioned in any proposal adopted by the plenary, but we believe this remains a central point. And I just come from the European Congress of my party, the EPP Congress in Rotterdam, and there is a strong connection now as far as the candidate status for Ukraine and Moldova is connected with the candidate status of the countries of the Balkans as well, and I think this is a very important point for the month and the years to come. And then the resolution of the European Parliament from the 4th of May this year says, stands ready to play its role and ensure proper follow-up to the conference outcome, calls therefore for the convening of a convention by activating the procedure for the revision of the treaties provided for in Article 48 of the Treaty on European Union, and calls on its Committee and Constitutional Affairs to launch the necessary procedure accordingly. And now we are very happy to see the former President of the European Parliament, Professor Dr. Klaus Hensch, who just arrived, and I have the honor, I said it already a little bit, Klaus, some minutes ago, I have the honor, if everything succeeds, and I think everything is in a good line, that I had the honor or have the honor to be your successor as far as the presidency of the European Parliament is concerned, but your predecessor as far as the presidency of the former Members Association is concerned. So welcome, Klaus Hensch. I am now eager to give the floor to our Vice President of the former Members Association, Monica Baldi, and to the Director of the European Union Historical Archives, Dieter Schlenker. Before then, Anthony Teasdale will open the roundtable with our eminent colleagues, members of Parliament present today. We are curious to listen to you, to understand and discuss about the next steps from the Parliament side. But now first, Monica Baldi and then Dr. Schlenker. Thank you so much. It's good to see you all and to look into familiar faces. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank, first of all, Director General Anthony Teasdale for this opportunity, and finally we can meet in person. This is very important. Let me thank FMA President Hans-Gert Pöttering, that he says, where is, he says the last day president, but I have to thank for his words of appreciation and his collaboration for this book, special book, together with Teresa Riera Madurell and myself. Above all, let me extend my gratitude to the director of the Historical Archives of the European Union, Dieter Schlenker, with whom we have been successfully cooperating for years and who has actively contributed to the production of this publication, which is, we hope, the second of a long series. In fact, this is a work carried out by former member association with historical archives, created over time, and our cooperation becomes stronger and stronger every year. So I think this is a great success of cooperation with European University Institute. Special thanks to the members of the Parliament. Thank you for being here. For us, it's very important to know what you say, and to my colleagues, the former members. And it's a pleasure to see you here. After a year of meetings and debate between European institutions and citizens, the closing ceremony of the Conference on the Future of Europe took place in May 9th, as you know, in the occasion of Europe Day, with the President Metsola, with President Macron and President von der Leyen. The participatory process was inaugurated on May 9th, 2021, by the late and esteemed President of the European Parliament, David Sassoli, to whom we have dedicated this publication, and anonymous even the event Present Future of Europe. I'm glad to remind you, the President Metsola, what she said about the former member association. You can find it in the publication. And she's stating that their expertise, experience, and institutional and political memory will serve as important and unique perspective towards building a stronger, more united Europe. As you know, Present Future of Europe event was coordinated directly by Dieter Schlenker, Teresa Riera Madurell, myself, and it was inaugurated with a special exhibition and a conference on May 21st in the beautiful and historical Villa Salviati in Florence. It's a prestigious venue of the European Institute University. In the exhibition, we could even take care of some documents and photographs that have been presented that outline the origin and development of 4 great European political foundations. That normally they preserve these documents in their headquarters, or even some in the historical archives. And so this is very important because what we did, it was something special. This collaboration with the foundation for us as former member association was something special, and we could show even in a special moment during even the State of Union. This is a special conference in Florence the European Institute normally does every year, and it's something of successful in our Europe. Particularly interesting was the high-level conference in which the mentioned proposal formulated by FMA was illustrated, and where the political and academic world, but above all European citizens, appreciate the work was done by the esteemed members of our reflection group. The FMA proposal for the Conference of the Future of Europe, the result, it was presented for the first time here in Brussels in February, and it was something special, as the President Petring said, and the document was immediately translated in the 24 official languages. And it's possible to download everything from our website, and that's because we want to make sure that you know our proposal, and for us it's very important even because they are concrete, and as President Petring said, we want to create something special, the path for, the path the European Union should undertake. With this extraordinary debate, I speak about the Conference of the Future of Europe, the European Parliament, the Council and the Commission have undertaken to listen to the voices of Europeans and to follow up within their competence on the recommendation made. Without doubt, the conference allowed the reflection on the past, present and future of the European Union and highlighted values and principles through recent proposals aimed at making it increasingly ready to respond to the needs of citizens and to face new challenges to ensure a Europe for all and for everybody, for all and of all. My hope is that the conclusion will be able to provide guidelines on the future of Europe, incorporating the ideas and the proposals that emerge from this democratic debate, while maintaining the right social, cultural, political and geographical balances. I believe it is essential to continue this dialogue, keeping alive a relay race between citizens and politicians, to continue giving a voice to almost 450 million European citizens, considering that culture plays a fundamental role. And precisely at this particular moment, it's important to promote the universal values of peace in the world through the arts and culture, above all culture, which must be accessible to all, also to help adapt in a positive way to a negative and traumatic condition, and to know how to give new impetus to one's existence to face an unknowns of society in transition, thus expressing in a particular word, cultural resilience. It's very important to speak about cultural resilience. This is the point. I think the proceeding of the high-level conference and the documents on show, just to say a few words and then I finish, it's very important to go on with this action. Don't stop to have this dialogue. So it's very important what our colleagues, the members of the European Parliament can say, but we have to go on with this dialogue. The proceeding of the high-level conference and the documents on show are presented together with the FMA proposal for the Conference on the Future of Europe and the contribution of personalities in this book published by FMA and printed by Historical Archives European Union. And therefore, I would like to thank, as I said, the European University Institute and again the Historical Archives for having realized this stimulating joint event, which is characterized by significant poster. This one you can see. And this poster, granted by the Historical Archive, used in the early 1980s by the European Commission to build an European image and identity through communication and awareness campaigns in the context of the Europe of Peoples agenda. So I think it will be very important for us to go on to continue this kind of work. So thank you all. Bye.
Well, just a few quick words from my side. I'm Dieter Schlenker. I'm coming from Florence, from the European University Institute, and I'm very pleased to be here today. I would like to thank the organizers, the team, Monica Baldi, Teresa Riera Madurell, and Hans-Gerd Pöttering, who made this possible and who were always keen to collaborate with us at the Historical Archives, which is probably not the primary partner that you would look for in a political institution like the European Parliament, but obviously we are part of the family. And in fact, the relations between us and the European Parliament go back as far as 40 years, when the institutions, the EU institutions, took the decision not to deposit their archives here in Brussels with an institution or to have their own management here, but they took a quite revolutionary decision to deposit all their internal papers in Florence at this new institute at the time that was called the European University Institute. Still today, the only European University Institute that is really part of the EU, because only EU member states can be members of the EUI and thus finance the institute and give the direction. So the historical archives of the European Union became part of that institute, which is an academic hub. And that's how we have a special mission and special vocation to be connecting to the policy area, and not just to be waiting and hosting individual researchers and just providing access to documents. So we reach out as much as we can to civil society, to the institutions. We seek partnerships, we seek collaboration, and who would be more natural partner than the former members? Former members and archives, I think that goes pretty well together, and I think we prove that in fact former members and archives can be very well and very active also together. And this publication, this event of this year is a perfect example for such a fruitful cooperation. And so we displayed at that occasion some of our documents, and in fact I found it quite fascinating to see the way we went in terms of history from the first formation of political groups in 1953. And in fact that's always to be remembered, that at the very beginning, at the coal and steel community, the assembly, the consultative assembly already took the decision to group the parliamentarians of the then assembly into political groups, 3 at the time, and then this group. But it was basically one of the first decisions that was taken, not to have an intergovernmental, like a state representative parliament, but to have a parliament that is ruled by political groups. Quite fascinating. This was then enlarged in the 90s by the creation of European parties, and in fact what was the special, let's say, addition to the event in March was then the addition of the foundations, the political foundations, which date from the mid-2000s. So this on the one side, but also coming back to the topic of the conference on the future of Europe, obviously the future of Europe has always been the future, also in the past. So basically what we have in our archives, 10 kilometers of papers from deriving from EU institutions, mainly from the Commission, but also very much from the European Parliament and other institutions, has always been the future. It has always been the ideas, the vision, the concepts, the projects of the European Union, and today is the result of the work of 80 years, basically starting with the federalist ideas during the Second World War, and then starting off with the first community project by Robert Schuman on 9 May 1950. So basically, what do we have? We start off with the Schuman Declaration. We start immediately afterwards with the first reflection on a European political community, which obviously fails. 1954, it's not the only failure that we produced in those 70 years, but we produce also a lot of successes. So we have 30 years later the Spinelli project, the first constitutional project that went very far, ratified here by the Parliament, pushed forward by the Parliament in 1982. And then another 20 years, and so we almost established a rhythm of 20 years of constitutional debate. So 1982, the Spinelli project, 2002, the convention, and now 2022, the future of Europe, the new project. I hope that we got now further, that we don't have to get together in 20 years again with discussing the same topics, because they're basically always the same. They're about decision-making, majority, and various other topics. So I hope this will be a fruitful exercise. I hope that we have contributed to this exercise, looking backwards, but obviously always looking forward from the past. And so I wish you all a fruitful discussion this afternoon. I'm very grateful to be with you, and thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Dieter Schlenker, for setting the scene. so effectively, to Monica Baldi, to Hans-Gert Pöttering. I wonder at this stage, before we start the round table discussion, whether it might make sense if Stephen Van Hecke, who's been the kind of academic advisor and coordinator on this project, also said a few remarks to set out a little bit more what's been achieved in this process. For those who are new to the project, just to say that the Former Members Association adopted this paper, Our European Union, Time to be Bold, to Act and to Deliver, which is set out in this book, which also provides an account of the seminar which was held at the European University Institute earlier this year.
Dear President Pöttering, distinguished members of the European Parliament and former members of the European Parliament, dear Director General, ladies and gentlemen. So thank you first of all, EPRS and Former Members Association, to have me. Also specifically to the Former Members Association, as you heard, I had the honor and pleasure to advise the reflection group on the future of Europe, which at the end of the day leaves us with this document. Thank you for the confidence, the collaboration and the experience, because I learned a lot too as a political scientist, so thank you. Secondly, as a Belgian, not being on the official program is a bit a risky business. There has been a very infamous moment in 1960 when someone took the floor without being on the program, and 9 months later he was killed. Fortunately, I was asked to be extra on the program. I'm not imposing myself. Anyway, I have 5 speaking points for you. The first one: what do you think the archives of the European institutions in Florence have? What do you think that the former members have of the European Parliament? What do you think that the future former members of the Parliament have? Papers, documents, books and pictures. Even in the digital age, this is the only thing that will last in 10, 20, 30 years. And therefore I'm very happy, also as a scientist, as a political scientist, to see that this is a book with pictures, with primary documents, and also a book itself. That was my first thought I wanted to share with you. The second one, given my age, but my grey hair, I think it's a great thing that also the Former Members Association has contributed to the future of the Conference on the Future of Europe, given their expertise, their experience, and their institutional and political memory. Third thought: did you have a look at the title of the contribution of the Former Members Association to the Conference on the Future of Europe? I quote, "Time to be bold, to act and to deliver." Point 4, enlargement is back. We have, as President Pöttering already said, one of the recommendations, so to say, is enlargement policy. Of course, we could not foresee what has happened since the 24th of February, and now we are discussing whether at the next European Council, not only Ukraine, but also Moldova and Georgia will be accepted as an official candidate member state of the EU. So things can change quite quickly a lot. I think, as a rather traditional pro-European, Western European citizen, enlargement is the biggest success of the EU that is mostly underestimated, especially in this part of the European continent. Myself, I quote in my contribution Alexander Stubb, so I will quote him now here again. "When we talk about enlargement, let us not give poor excuses, because we know that we are never and yet always ready to enlarge." Fifth and final point, it has already been mentioned, rightly so, by President Pöttering, and especially also given the young people here in the audience, students, maybe trainees in the Parliament, the EPRS. Point 5, and then I just quote and finish: "There is a need for more European education and information, in particular for the younger generations, especially through the development of multilingual and digitally accessible pedagogical materials for all citizens on the history of Europe, based in particular on transnational perspectives, with the House of European History here a couple of meters away, and on Euro integration and the EU democratic system. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed to all of those speakers. And now we're going to move to a roundtable discussion in which we're going to explore some of the issues which are set out in the book, in the paper that the FMA submitted to the Conference on the Future of Europe, and look back to the conference itself and forward to what follows. And it's my privilege, therefore, to introduce not only for this purpose two former presidents of the European Parliament, and I'd like to ask Klaus Hensch whether you'd like to take a chair here at on the dais, but also 6 sitting members of the European Parliament who have been part of the Parliament's delegation to the Conference on the Future of Europe. Paolo Rangel, who can't yet be with us, we hope that he will join us during the course of the afternoon. Mark Tarabella, Sandra Goetze, Gunnar Beck, Michiel Hugevin, and Helmut Scholz. And since time presses, and I know there's a hard stop, as now one says, to this event because of the memorial service for the former members who are sadly no longer with us, we'll go straight into that discussion. So I don't know whether, Hans-Gert, there's anything you want to add? No? Okay. Mr. Hensch, would you like to join us and say a few words? And then we'll go to the 6 members of the European Parliament to give their perspectives.
Thank you very much. I had to take this place because of my hearing aids. The acoustic in this room is, for me at least, not for you, but for me it is difficult. So I am not sure whether I've all got what you said, Madam Baldi, and of course I was a little bit late because of the Deutsche Bahn. In Germany, not in Belgium. Okay. Many thanks for giving me the opportunity to address a few words, which are not so much my ideas on the conference and the result of the conference, but in a certain way 3 points of reflection on what we have to do in the European Union in the future. In my eyes, it is not a general idea, but it is perhaps 2 or 3 points. I have to look on my papers because the first one is what we have to keep in mind, I think. Whatever we think about the reforms which are necessary, a union, that union, our union, is not a state, and as it is not a state, it has to have its own system of democratic legitimation and checks and balances. In my eyes, the union should not try to become a copy of nation states' democracy, parliamentarism, government, electoral system, and others. The union's democracy is certainly not perfect, but it is nevertheless considerably increasing people's control and influence on cross-border issues and in areas far beyond nation states' democratic competences. The European Union is, and in my eyes, it is important. The European Union is the first and unique trans-state democracy in the world. And we should be proud of it and stop the foolish babble of democratic deficit. My second point, Hans-Gert knows nearly exactly what I'm thinking about. The second point The Union may not lose itself by looking after a chimera of core Europe. Use the existing treaty that provides for a lot of different choices and closer cooperation that have not yet been fully used by member states. An institutional core Europe composed by some member states would split up the Union. But different cores of various member states acting together on certain policy fields like common currency, defense, energy, etc., is the appropriate solution. The Union is certainly unfinished, but it is not at all uncompleted. And my second remark, or my third remark, we must bring, of course, our ambitions in line with our capabilities and our capabilities in line with our competencies, and vice versa. No new institution or competence would revive the anemic economic growth in some member states, remediate the migration drama on the Mediterranean Sea, coordinate the economic, financial and social policies of member states, spread Europe-wide social justice, surmount mental reservations and national jealousy in security matters. And my last point, my last remark, the Union has undoubtedly lost people's support to a considerable high degree. People are fed up with debates on new constructions and institutions. It is by action on policies, not by constructing institutions, that the Union will regain support. A new treaty reform that is not accompanied by a clear and charismatic political project will fail. And what could be this project, or be wanted or not? This is indeed, as you mentioned, it is enlargement. Whatever we think about that yet, it is a project we have to settle in the future. Thanks.
So now, ladies and gentlemen, we move to the panel discussion, and we're going to hear and see the perspectives of various members of the European Parliament who have served as part of the Parliament's delegation to the conference. We're going to do it by political group, and it's my great pleasure to ask Mark Tarabella, member of the European Parliament from Belgium, from the Socialists and Democrats, whether he would like to share some of his thinking and perspective on the issues which were raised in the FMA paper and in the book that we're discussing this afternoon. Over to you.
Bien, cette conférence était certainement une occasion qu'il fallait saisir pour relancer le processus européen, parce que même si tout n'est pas négatif, et justement il faut insister sur les choses positives, et les dernières années nous ont montré que la difficulté, on savait faire face à la difficulté. Le plan de relance, il y a eu la crise, le plan de relance, mais le plan de relance de 750 milliards, moi je ne dis pas 1750, parce qu'il y en a 1000, c'est le budget européen, mais les 750 milliards, faut-il encore qu'ils soient bien utilisés, il faudra le vérifier, qu'ils soient bien utilisés partout, dans l'intérêt des citoyens, donc ça, il y aura des contrôles à faire, mais c'était déjà pour moi un espoir pour le futur, que l'Europe a eu difficile dans les années qui viennent de se passer, suite aux politiques d'austérité qui ont quand même divisé l'Europe et qui ont créé pas mal de difficultés et qui les ont agrandies dans certains pays. Il y a eu cet esprit de solidarité. Les 750 milliards, c'est important. La crise du Covid est venue. Et la crise du Covid a montré que, quand on regarde un peu toute la planète, il y a eu des critiques, je sais, mais quand on a entendu les mots qui ont été utilisés parfois à l'égard de nos dirigeants qui ont dû prendre des mesures, c'est évidemment déplacé de parler de dictature, etc. Oui, les dictatures, elles existent ailleurs. Mais il y a eu aussi une solidarité européenne par rapport aux vaccins, le partage des vaccins. Le partage des vaccins et le fait qu'il y ait eu cette solidarité qui fait que la population a été protégée peut-être mieux que nulle part ailleurs dans le monde. Et aussi, on s'est rendu compte que des services étaient essentiels. Et je fais un pont avec une des priorités que l'on va, dans les guidelines qu'on a dégagées. Il y en a une qui dit qu'il faut évidemment aller vers cette économie sociale de marché hautement compétitive. Oui, on vit dans une économie de marché, il faut le rester, moi je la défends. Mais pas que. Pourquoi est-ce qu'on parle de compétitivité dans les secteurs qui nous ont été fondamentaux tels que la santé? On s'est rendu compte que la santé, elle souffre. Manque de personnel, des horaires particuliers, une infirmière la nuit pour 30 lits. Et oui, parce qu'on a introduit cette notion de compétitivité, de compétition. Et donc clairement, faisons la reconnaissance que l'économie de marché, c'est notre quotidien et elle doit fonctionner, mais elle doit être corrigée aussi par des services publics forts, qui sont dans l'éducation, dans la culture, dans la santé, dans des services de base. Et les services publics, il faut les réaffirmer. Et donc quand on parle toujours, moi j'ai été coprésident de l'intergroupe d'économie sociale à une époque, je la découvrais parce que je la connais dans certains pays, mais elle a des formes variables. En Espagne, il y a même des groupes industriels. Mondragon est connu, groupe industriel qui fonctionne sous forme d'économie sociale. Et donc je crois que c'est vraiment fondamental et je vais peut-être ne pas être trop long parce que je dois m'excuser auprès de Thérèse Arrière-Maduel, mon ancienne collègue excellente. Je n'écouterai pas les conclusions parce que mon train n'attendra pas. Je dois vous quitter à 5h15. Et donc, pour aller straight to the point, on vient de vivre cette période de solidarité. La guerre en Ukraine, déclenchée par les Russes, la Russie, a fait en sorte que nous sommes solidaires. Pour l'essentiel, on est tous solidaires. Et l'Europe est solidaire parce qu'elle est forte. Économiquement, elle est redevenue forte. On a surmonté la crise par la solidarité. Nos États ont investi. Et parfois, ici, j'ai l'impression qu'on oublie l'essentiel. On a encore voté une résolution la semaine passée qui demandait... Oui, là, je peux entrer dans un détail, mais je n'ai qu'une position qui ne représente pas celle de mon groupe. Quand on dit qu'on va arrêter demain, c'était le paragraphe 6 de la résolution de la semaine dernière en mini-plénière, on va demander l'arrêt immédiat des importations de gaz et de pétrole de Russie, et surtout pas importer plus d'ailleurs, mais d'aller vers des énergies renouvelables. Et puis on ajoute un petit sous-paragraphe en disant, mais tout ça, attention, les mesures que l'on va prendre ne doivent avoir aucun impact négatif sur les travailleurs et sur les familles. Mais c'est de la blague, c'est de la magie, c'est pas de la politique ça. À un moment donné, moi j'ose dire que l'arrêt immédiat, je ne l'aurais pas voté, mais c'était pas nominatif. L'arrêt immédiat du pétrole et du gaz aujourd'hui n'arrêtera pas la guerre demain, mais va arrêter des usines, va créer des centaines de millions de chômeurs en Europe, une économie en récession. Et qu'est-ce qu'on aura gagné? Rien. On aura perdu, on sera moins fort, on sera donc moins solidaire dans le futur, et on risque de déstabiliser nos systèmes et nos économies. Et donc la solidarité, oui, mais à un moment donné, il faut savoir raison garder. Le cœur, c'est important, aussi en politique, mais il y a la raison aussi qui compte. Et je voudrais juste terminer en disant que ce qui m'apparaît important dans le futur et le grand défi, c'est que l'élargissement était nécessaire. Mais je ne suis pas sûr qu'il a été une grande réussite, monsieur le professeur. Pourquoi? Parce qu'on a élargi avant d'approfondir. Et aujourd'hui, je sais que c'est de la plomberie institutionnelle, que les citoyens ne savent pas trop ce que c'est et vont peut-être pas trop s'y intéresser, mais il faut changer le traité et faire en sorte que l'unanimité soit bannie. Parce que l'unanimité confère un droit de veto et donc permet, jusqu'à présent, à des semi-dictateurs ou des semi-démocrates tels que Viktor Orban de faire prospérer une caste d'oligarques au sein de l'Union européenne, de tourner le dos aux valeurs européennes, mais de profiter de l'argent de la solidarité européenne. Et ça, il ne faut plus le permettre à l'avenir. Et on ne le permettra plus lorsqu'on aura une règle de la majorité, y compris qualifiée, qui permettra de dire toi, si tu continues à brader les valeurs démocratiques, bah peut-être que jusqu'au pire, l'exclusion peut être prononcée par rapport à certains pays. Et donc là, il faudra réformer les traités. Et puis je dis quelque chose qui est fondamental, c'est aussi une inclusion sociale. L'Europe aujourd'hui, c'est aussi 22 pays sur 27 où il y a un salaire minimum, mais il est 10 fois plus important dans le pays où il est le plus élevé, c'est-à-dire le Luxembourg, que dans le pays où il est le moins élevé, la Roumanie. Et donc ça ne peut pas continuer à fonctionner. Et je crois qu'à un moment donné, il faudra faire en sorte que des priorités soient le relèvement du niveau de vie dans certains pays d'Europe. Je ne vais pas les citer, sinon je me fâche avec des gens, mais je l'ai déjà fait dans le passé. Mais regardez ce qui se passe au Liban. Ce n'est pas l'Europe, c'est à notre frontière. Eh bien, on appauvrit maintenant le Liban, qui s'est appauvri lui-même par un système politique foireux. Mais aujourd'hui, tous les cerveaux du Liban quittent le Liban. Mais aussi la main-d'œuvre utile, les infirmières et les médecins quittent, parce qu'il y a des recrutements d'ailleurs européens, parce qu'on manque de main-d'œuvre chez nous. On appauvrit le Liban de ses forces vives pour combler les lacunes chez nous. C'est ce qui se passe aussi au sein de l'Union européenne. Certains pays ne sont pas capables de donner un avenir à leur jeunesse prometteuse, et donc ils fuient et ils doivent travailler ailleurs. Et c'est ça que je voudrais terminer, dire attention, tout n'est pas angélique. L'Europe est le plus beau cadeau qui a été fait à tous les citoyens de la deuxième partie du XXe siècle. Il y a des menaces sur l'Europe, il y a des menaces sur son devenir. Eh bien, il faut regarder les problèmes en face, ne pas les ignorer, et justement être fort à l'avenir, être plus solidaire. Je ne parlerai pas des Balkans, mais je crois qu'avant d'élargir aujourd'hui, il faut réformer, il faut avoir aussi, sur le moment de la fin, une politique de défense forte européenne. Parce que dans les Balkans, c'est une poudrière. Ce le sera encore à l'avenir. Ça l'a été en 1914, ça l'a été en 1992, parce qu'avant la guerre en Ukraine, il y avait la guerre de l'ex-Yougoslavie. J'espère que dans le futur, il n'y aura pas. Mais si un jour, il devait y avoir une étincelle dans les Balkans, eh bien, on doit pouvoir, en tant que force européenne, l'éteindre. Et plus attendre le bon vouloir des Américains, qui ne viendront plus puisqu'ils se désintéressent du fait de régler les conflits dans le monde. Et donc, je crois que là, il faudra avoir cette défense qui soit une réalité. Je n'aurai pas de deuxième occasion de m'exprimer. Malheureusement, il n'y aura pas de débat parce que je vais laisser parler mes collègues et puis je devrais vous quitter. Merci.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Tarabella, and that plead for a more social Europe and social dimension in the building of the future of Europe moves straight on to Sandra Gozzi, who represents France from the Renew Europe group, but I think had a very distinguished career in Italian politics, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, you're not mistaken, and I'm very proud as a European citizen to be elected in a country different from the country where I was born and from the country where I was a member of government. Not everybody, it wasn't very consensual in Italy what I did. There are some people who even asked to withdraw my nationality for this choice. Of course, they don't know the treaty, but I would say they don't even know good manners after all. But I mean, this is behind us, but this is what happened. I say also to the former member of the European Parliament, these things happens not on planet Mars, in a founding member of the European Union called Italy. So I mean, I think that we have a lot of work to do to improve this aspect, and at least to ensure that part of the press and part of the member of the government know and read the treaty, also and know the Italian constitution. It's impossible to withdraw the nationality of one European citizen if you get only one single nationality. But I'm not here to speak about that. Also, if it is linked to what I'm going to say, that my experience of the conference, the Future of Union, is very positive. And I was hopeful but worried at the beginning. Hopeful because I strongly believe that this proposal, for which we have been working a lot, which was launched by Emmanuel Macron the 4th of March 2019, around which we have debated at the beginning of the mandate, was certainly a very good idea, and we were right at the European Parliament to put it as a priority at the beginning of our term, because after all we felt the need to be discussing and building Europe in a new way. This is what the conference is all about. It's not a big opinion poll at continental scale. It's not a simple dialogue consultation. It is a way of engaging citizens and representatives of the citizens, be they at European level, national level or government, in a different way. And at the beginning I was worried, and at the beginning of the conference I was worried, because it wasn't easy at all. To find a modus operandi, to find a working method, to allow to promote a confidence building process among citizens and representative. Between citizens and representative of the institutions, and after all, I was very satisfied and relieved at the end of the process, because I think that the outcome was very positive, and the first to be very satisfied in their speeches, in what they said during the conference, at the margin of the conference, were the representatives of the citizens. And I think that this is something on which we have to build upon. To have to build upon right now, and as the European Parliament, we have already started to give to ensure a serious follow-up to the serious work of the citizens. After all, what they said, especially in the last plenary conference, was we have accepted this process, we have engaged in this process, we have discussed with you our recommendations. Now we want our recommendation to be implemented. And I think that we have to take very seriously the serious work of the citizens. What the citizens discussed with the other component of the conference, which were represented in a different form of legitimacy of the European Union. Legitimacy of the European Parliament, the national parliament, of the ministers in the member of the government of the European Commission. And we have already started to ensure a follow-up. Of course, there is a lot of things that can be done and should be done by promoting new EU programs, by enlarging the existing programs. They insisted a lot on education. They insisted a lot of bringing more European approaches in the school system. They insisted a lot on mobility. They insisted a lot on digital and green transformation. And on this, there are many things that we can do by promoting new programs, by taking new legislative initiatives. Ursula von der Leyen has announced that she will say in the State of the Union speeches in September how the Commission is ready to ensure a follow-up on several recommendations which require new political legislative initiative. And then there is a need for the European Parliament to exercise its right of legislative initiative, and we have done so. Of course, we have started before to discuss about the new electoral law, but the new European electoral law that we have adopted in the European Parliament, which includes also the transnational list, but many other innovations, is already an answer to explicit requests of the citizens in the conference. We said we want to strengthen the European dimension of politics. We want to strengthen the role of the European political parties. We want to elect a part of the member of the European Parliament by voting the European political movement, the technical answer, the legal answers to this request of the citizens. As we all know, it's transnational list. And we have adopted a new law exercising our right of legislative initiative. And we have also given an answer to the 20% of the recommendations of the citizens which require treaty revision, because it is clear the citizens have said something very clear. Already the union with 27 members is not working effectively. It will be even less effective while enlarging in the future, because it is clear that, our project, as I mentioned, is to pursue the enlargement. So we want a union which decides with more democracy and more effectiveness. We want a union which decides by majority in everything but the decision to welcome new members of the club. This is explicitly the request of the citizens. So it is clear that if we want to enlarge the majority voting, we have to modify the treaty. If we want, as it was mentioned by several speakers before me, increasing the role of the European Union in the health sector, it is clear that, today it is not a shared competence. If we want health to become a shared competence of the Union, we have to modify the treaty. And this is what we are doing at the European Parliament. They have already adopted a political resolution. We are now working, I hope next week, we'll adopt a resolution where we trigger formally the process of Article 48. And then the political battle will start. And then the political battle will start, because it is clear that our openness and our constructive attitude as a European Parliament is not exactly, it doesn't find an exact equivalent within the Council. So this is, will be my last point. We will see. We are working with our political families, with our leaders in the European Council, with the like-minded partners, to have a solid majority. We cannot start a process which, even only on some specific issue, open the treaty revision by voting 14 versus 13. It is clear that we need to build up a solid majority in the Council, a politically solid majority in the Council beyond the legal aspect to trigger the process, and this is what we are doing. I hope it will happen. I hope it will happen still under the French presidency. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Sandro Gozzi, for that perspective. I'm conscious of the time. We need, at the very latest, to end this meeting at about 17:35, ideally at 17:30. I'm now passing to Gunnar Beck from the Identity and Democracy Group from Germany.
Thank you very much, Anthony. Yes, I'm taking a slightly different perspective. If we look back onto the last 30 years, these have been 30 years of ever more integration. I can see the EU is regarding this as a success, but no one can possibly argue that there's 30 years of ever closer union or more integration have coincided with sustained economic growth and the strengthening of Europe's competitiveness in the world. In fact, for the last 15 of those 30 years, the European Union has been beset by one crisis after another. Financial, euro crisis, a spell of a climate crisis, a migration crisis, then more climate crisis, then a corona crisis, there's a Ukraine crisis, and soon there'll be more climate talk. Now, the Ukraine crisis is really the only one that's not been self-inflicted, I think. Now, I can't address, bearing in mind the time factor, I can't address each and every one of those crises. Let me focus on two. One I've not even mentioned. It's a democracy and the rule of law crisis. We all know, if we're honest, that many of the instruments the EU has adopted in recent years to tackle the various crises I've mentioned have been adopted in breach of the treaties. The treaty forbids practically everything the European Central Bank has been doing for a good reason, and the chickens are coming home to roost now because we have massive inflation. There's a democracy crisis in the European Union, although I agree with what Professor Hensch said, or what I took him to say. I'm not saying that the European Union is particularly undemocratic by the standards of a supra or international organization, but it's tried to arrogate many of the functions of the nation state to itself, and it's ill-equipped to provide the accountability and democratic mechanisms to render these processes democratic. An example, the very example is provided by the Conference on the Future of Europe. The Conference on the Future of Europe presents itself as a democratic exercise. As a matter of fact, around 800 citizens have been acting more or less like EU legislators. That's obvious from the demand that their recommendations be put into law in some form or another. But let's look at how those 800 quasi-legislators have been selected. They were selected by Kantar, a long-standing business partner of the European Union and a subsidiary of the US private equity investment company Bain Capital. Secondly, although I cannot comment on the methodology in every respect, it's quite interesting that most of the respondents to Kantar's invitation to participate in the conflict were pro-European. That's obvious from the proceedings. But it's quite obvious that if an EU institution is ringing up people and says, would you like to participate in an EU exercise, the likelihood that people will respond positive will depend in large measure on whether they are ready pro-EU by temperament. That's in fact the result of a study commissioned by my honourable colleague Mr. Hoogheven's party. The more pro-EU you are, the more likely you are the more likely you are to respond favourably to a request to participate. And then, when the citizens arrive for their bi-weekly plenary sessions in Strasbourg, the first thing that happened was they were greeted by pro-EU Spinelli experts who gathered them together first in lavish receptions and then in seminars where they were told about the problems the EU is facing, and then they were given the solutions, all of which are implying more EU integration. And then thirdly, one of the recommendations that the conference is proposing are transnational lists. That would mean that in future Germans would be voting for representatives from Bulgaria, Malta or Finland. I think this makes very little sense, and I doubt most Europeans would see the deeper democratic significance of this. So far, I've argued that the process whereby the citizens were selected was biased towards selecting pro-EU citizens. Let me give you one further point to buttress this argument. At the beginning of the Conference on the Future of Europe, Mrs. von der Leyen said that citizens could participate not only in person but through the multilingual platform. At least 50,000 people did so. But the recommendations couldn't be micromanaged there. There was a lot of skepticism and a lot of reservation about more EU integration. Perhaps that was the reason why the content of the platform has now been removed. It cannot be accessed on the internet any longer. The only thing that can still be accessed are the summaries of these recommendations, provided, of course, by the subsidiary of Bain Capital, Kantar. So, I think, bearing in mind that others wish to speak as well, and that I've got more to say, but don't really wish to monopolize events here, I think let's leave it at that. I hope I've made my point clear.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Gunnar Beck. I'll now go over to somebody who's just been referenced, in fact, I think, in Mr. Beck's intervention, namely Michael Hugeveen from the Netherlands, representing the European Conservatives and Reformers Group. Please.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me here. I must say that maybe it's because I'm a conservative member of the Conservative Group, or maybe it's my generation, but I feel honored of being here, but it feels a bit like joining a gentleman's club. So I find it a bit a lack of diversity here in this respect. Without further ado, on the Conference on the Future of Europe, being a very active member in the Conference on the Future of Europe, I must say that on the process itself, I find it difficult to, well, let me start first. It's always interesting to discuss the future of the European Union, and it's always good to have an academic debate on where we should go to and how we should be, as a union, be future-proof. However, how this conference was, and my colleague Beck also referenced to it, it's difficult to legitimize the outcome, because the process of the conference was set up quite flawed, and it's not just my group or the group of Mr. Beck saying it. It's also experts on citizens panels. By the way, I'm a proponent of citizen panels. However, there were experts such as David van Rijbroek who have said that the onset of the Conference on the Future of Europe was flawed. It was steered too much, and improvements could have been made. Nevertheless, as I said, it's good to have a discussion on what we believe as ECR Group on where the EU should go. I think that's a far more interesting discussion than the process, how we eventually got here. And again, I feel honored of sitting here and being able to express my ideas. And I think that it is very important for the EU to take a critical look at what it can do for the citizens and what it already does right for the citizens. And we have conducted an independent poll in the Netherlands on what people like about the EU and what they don't like and what they are not interested in. And the thing they very much like about EU is already there, and that's the common market. The common market adds value to the citizens of the EU. It creates jobs, it creates wealth, it creates transnational exchange, it makes the lives of the people easier. So let's try to focus on strengthening the common market. Try and focus on deepening the common market by expanding the capital markets union, for example. These are in the European Union. It's very difficult to get a loan, not from a non-bank, for example. While in the United States, it's much easier. So these are things that add value to the daily lives of the citizens. But also let's look critically at what does not work. And from our research, it was shown that, especially among the Dutch population, there's people very much tend to disagree on where the euro, the economic and monetary union, is going. By creating more common debt, by not looking critically at the levels of debt that we see across the member states of the EU. And that is not solved by creating more common debt. That is by looking critically at the Eurozone, by seeing what is going wrong. And the previous speaker who was sitting here, who unfortunately left, was saying, yeah, the austerity measures have created a huge divide in the EU, or in the Eurozone. Maybe that's true, but maybe we should think outside the box here and look at the euro while maybe it's a one-size-fits-no-one right now. And maybe some member states who are not able to abide to the rules that we have set out in the very beginning should be able to leave the Eurozone, maybe for a time, to reevaluate their currency or have a default. But we should adapt our models towards what is working and what is not working. And we should not force ourselves into something that will not work in the future. Another part is our security union. Well, we have a security union, and it's called NATO. NATO is the cornerstone of the security of the European continent. So instead of talking about bolstering our European defenses and working more together with our military units across member states, we should maybe bolster our military spending by paying up to our promises that we made to NATO and work more closely together with our allies across the Atlantic. Because eventually, if you want to make a point at the world stage in a world that's getting more globalized, that's getting more multipolar, it's crucial for us to have a close relationship with the United States. And finally, the point on the veto rights. We don't necessarily think getting rid of the veto will improve anything. First of all, veto rights protect member states' rights. So we are all criticizing Hungary right now for not abiding to the oil and gas embargo on Russia. But maybe it's also the case that Hungary was 80% reliant on Russian oil and gas and have nuclear power plants that are being constructed by the Russians. So, of course, they try to protect their member states' rights. So we should also take into account that when we get rid of the veto, some countries might feel left behind, might feel neglected, and might start seeking alliances within the Union. So they might start looking for like-minded countries who are also willing to vote against certain types. So maybe you create even a bigger division within the Union. So again, to conclude, is that we believe that the EU is of tremendous value, and we believe that the EU has brought us so much and is still bringing us so much. So we didn't get into this conference with being a destroyer of the EU, but we just want a very different EU. And I believe that this debate, this diversity of thought, is sometimes lacking in the European Parliament. And, well, maybe that's also the case for the Conference on the Future of Europe, where the process indeed was not what we expected, unfortunately. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Michael Hugeveen, for those remarks. And on the diversity issue, the diversity of the panel doesn't necessarily reflect the diversity of the views which were doubtless being expressed by members of the EP delegation. But I know that the former Members Association worked very hard to try and ensure that there might be more balance in respect of those who are among the members here. But last but not least, I'd like to go over to Helmut Scholz, a member of the European Parliament from Germany, representing the left, who's going to give his own perspective on these issues. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. And also for me, it is an honor to be in this room, in this space, and to discuss the questions on the future of Europe. And if we are speaking about diversity, of course, I will bring an additional color into the debate here. But the conference on the future of Europe was strongly gender quoted from the composition, from the construction, and it was the European Parliament who insisted on this approach that I want to start immediately. So I hope that we in the future continue this thinking how we are combining different views, not only ideological, political, etc., but also from the question of reflecting where the participants are coming from. And that leads me to the point that in the beginning, immediately after Ursula von der Leyen, maybe being aware about the failure of the Spitzenkandidaten system after the last elections, said to the European Parliament, I want to have a conference where citizens are frankly open, without any limitations, are discussing where the European Union is functioning from their point of view and where not. And I remind this starting point because I think that is important to understand how the conference went. And the European Parliament, cross over the political groups, agreed to insist on this anchoring of the conference. And it was not easy in the governance. And I see some faces who worked behind the curtains to make it true to go into this direction. And it was hard because Council and Commission had a lot of problems with this approach of the conference, that citizens' orientation is really the basics of this conference. And we had wondered as parliamentarians from the European Parliament when suddenly in the midterm of the conference there was a shift within the governance when there came the idea, yes, we have to focus on the citizens, because there was a growing fear that from the political, from the representative democracy comes proposals, comes ideas which could question how the EU today is functioning, and that is about the future of Europe. I want to be frank on that, because I was in the executive committee as observer for our group. And therefore, I think the conclusions, the recommendations, 48 pages, 9 chapters, 320 concrete proposals, and 48 recommendations are speaking a lot what people are expecting. Not everything is expecting a treaty change. But of course, I would say some of the most sincere and important questions are asking for treaty changes. So we as, in the future being former members of the European Parliament, have to deal with this issue now. So what we are doing, and I think it would be not honest, and it would be a distrust and giving not the right answer to these expectations of citizens put into these conclusions, in these recommendations. Because if they want to have a health union, a real functioning health union, where public health is a public good and not liberalized, as it was quite well, from my point of view, described by my colleague Tarabella, when they are insisting on having a social progress protocol included into the primary law of the European Union, then of course it needs changing. And that is then questioning how the internal market the common market is really functioning. And I think that is a very important point we have to discuss seriously in the preparation for the convention. About the majority voting, so overcoming the animosity of the decision making in the European Union. Probably from the left, we will have a huge problem if we are delegating the foreign and security policy to be voted by a majority alone, because we would give up, from the German point of view, the parliamentarian precondition for deciding at the member state level on that. So if we are changing the system, I think then we have also to agree that the European Parliament should get the full competence and co-decision on that issues. So if we are going into this direction, then we have to make a full democratic change in the governance, in the multi-governance structure of the European Union. And that leads me to the remark, the European Union, in our understanding, is a multi-governance structure. And for as citizens complaining about the educational lackages or not knowing how the European Union is going, it's not important, finally, who is deciding where and what. He wants to have a solution for her and his problems. And that, I think, is a democratic necessity to re-strengthen European integration. And as Sandro Gozzi is with us, he is one of those MEPs who are in the Spinelli group, in the European Federalist Union, etc., actively working in that direction. But that's, of course, not at all. I was yesterday in a meeting with European Debate. It's also another NGO, a democratic structure, discussing the outcome of the conference. And suddenly, some representatives from the European University Institute, where I had the chance to follow the citizens panel on values and democracy, said, the treaty change is not the most important one. We want to concentrate on the process. We want to continue these panels. We want to have a permanent linkage between representative and participatory democracy. And I think this is really the challenge. Here we have to shape the future, and that is linked to the environmental issues. The citizens have very highly voted that sustainability, social and ecological, must be very high on the agenda of the European Union. And that needs also an European energy union, meaning we have to introduce a European-wide energy mix to solve the problems of today and tomorrow in the energy policy, to avoid energy poverty, to create equal access to energy for everybody throughout the 27, and probably also of the new neighbor countries from the Western Balkans, or from Ukraine, or from Moldova, etc. So I think these are the main issues. And finally, not to be too lengthy, we have not yet spoken about one of the crises in the past that was a migration issue. And a lot of citizens, even in the plenary debate, and we have all had the chance to listen, they ask, we want to have a solidarity solution with people, with citizens, with human beings forced to leave their home, forced to leave their home countries, motherland. And I think that is then also telling a lot how we are dealing with the refugees from Ukraine, and how we are supporting those countries who have to take the most heavy burden to give them a new home, and how we are dealing with these issues in the future. So I hope that the veto right and all these aspects is overcome. We have to find mechanisms, we have to find new tools to solve together these questions in a multi-governance structure of the European Union.
Helmut Scholz, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, and thank you to the other members of the European Parliament who have been reflecting on their own experience as part of this great experience of the Conference on the Future of Europe and the implications of it for the policy choices and institutional changes that may yet follow. I'm now going to invite Teresa Rera Madurell, who of course is one of the co-editors of this important volume, to say a few concluding remarks, and then invite colleagues to go down as quickly and as efficiently as possible to the event, which will be taking place in the hemicycle, the annual memorial service. Teresa.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon to everybody. After listening to such excellent contributions, I will be really very brief. First of all, let me thank the member of the Parliament and also our former President of the European Parliament, Klaus Heinz, for having participated in this event, and also thank Director General of the EP Research Service, Anthony Tisdale, for his always valuable collaboration with our association. It has been a real pleasure to listen to you all in this session, as it was to participate in the Conference of Florence and to look through the interesting exhibition displayed in the EU Historical Archives. Thank you, Dieter Schlenker, for your always excellent collaboration. And of course, to have the possibility, you're here, and of course, to have had the possibility to count on the ideas and proposals of the reflection group led by Professor Van Ecken, and to count with the collaboration of the European Political Foundations and the UI for the series of seminars under the name Together for the Future of Europe, which have been taking place during several months and that many of you have followed and participated. And now, thanks again to the support of the UI, we have this inspiring book that I have the privilege of being co-editor together with President Pottering and with Vice President Monica Baldi, with whom it is always an immense pleasure to work. Well, our aim, as you all know, in all these events, including the book, has been just to contribute our grain of sand to the Conference of the Future of Europe, a conference that we all agree in considering as an excellent opportunity that came at the right time and that we have not to miss. The conference has now finished its work. President Pottering has already talked about its final outcome, and many of you have already mentioned specific aspects of the conclusions, all of them of great importance, but unfortunately I have no time to mention all of them in 2 minutes. But after listening to you carefully to you all and reading the contributions of the book, it's like I just briefly underline 2 aspects that I think we all agree that are crucial. The first one is the need to move quickly now, to find a way to implement the outcome of the conference and its conclusions and its continued follow-up to get results as soon as possible in order to meet the renewed citizens' expectations in the European project. And not only that, but also the importance of doing it together. At this crucial moment, after the outbreak of this horrific Russian invasion of Ukraine, I am sure we all agree that unity is the word to be successful, and it has been proved from many experiences of the past. And the second aspect I like to underline is the urgent need to reduce Europe's dependency as much as possible from third countries, governments and companies, in security and defense, of course, but also in key strategic areas such as technology, medicine, energy, among others, both in supply chains and in critical infrastructures. I really share the words by Charles Michel when he said that strategic autonomy of Europe is our new common project for this century. This should be our commitment. And just to finish, I'd like to underline something that has been latent in all your contributions. I am referring to the belief that if the EU needs to be reformed, is not because its fundamental principles and values written in Article 2 of the treaty are obsolete. It is because being more important than ever needs to be strengthened. Now, the conclusions of the Conference of the Future of Europe opens a great opportunity for that. From now on, as many of you say, we have just to move quickly and work hard to make the conclusions reality. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. It's been a great pleasure to welcome you back into the library reading room. I hope you've enjoyed it. And I'm going to ask Elisabetta Funke to now give instructions as to how the rest of the day should proceed.
Thank you again to all of you for being there. And now we will go all together to the hemicycle in order to participate in the memorial service for deceased former MEPs. I hope really that you can join us. I don't know whether your agenda would allow it. And of course, you know that there will be a tribute also for the two former presidents, President Sassoli and President Lauplamp. So thank you.
Very nice to see you. I hope I'll see you again. I try to continue the legacy of Good to know. Thanks so much.